This is AIM Agenda. Thanks for your company. With me now, the Social Services Minister, Scott Morrison. Mr Morrison, good to see you. We've got a lot to talk about in terms of the resettlement of refugees, and I want to get to that in a moment. First, though, the political story of the day relates to Simon Benson's story about this reshuffle. Where do you think it's come from this morning?
Oh, I've got no idea, but look, we're focused on what's happening outside this building, not what's happening inside this building. That's jobs for Australian families. 19% of Australian families aren't in a job, and we need to improve that statistic. Over 560,000 children growing up in a jobless family. Now, we've got some good jobs started this week. We're encouraged by that, but we've got a lot more to do. But on those matters, look, speculation.
But in terms of some of the names here, like Andrew Robb, that would be bizarre if he was to be axed, wouldn't it? He's been one of the best ministers.
Well, I think Andrew, of course, and Ian Macfarlane too. They've been doing excellent jobs in their portfolios. But at the end of the day, we all serve, as Peter Dutton said this morning, at the pleasure of the Prime Minister, and these are matters for him, and he's the bloke to ask about it. But at the end of the day, that's speculation.
But even someone like Jamie Briggs as well, an up-and-comer, being referred to here in danger. Well, he's not going to be too pleased about that.
Well, I suspect Jamie's not, but I mean, again, speculation. These are matters for the Prime Minister. I'm focused on what's happening outside this building,
I know,
like Australians are, not what's focused on inside. And I know the gallery gets very interested in these, but today, frankly, I'm far more interested in what we're doing with the various communities coming together, the settlement services providers, and I know you'd agree. I mean, this horrible story over Tara Brown is something that's, I think, breaks Australia's heart and just redoubles our efforts as to why we need to attack the scourge of domestic violence.
Absolutely, and that is heartbreaking, that issue. We'll get to that as well as the refugees. I do want to just finish off here, though, if I can, because
I've already finished on that.
I know, but you are seen as pivotal in terms of all of this stuff about the Prime Minister, his leadership. If there's to be any change, you are seen as the person that is pivotal in all of this. Do you accept that?
Well, I don't quite understand.
That if you were to say, Prime Minister, you can't win, and that the majority of the party room said to you, Scott Morrison, we want you to work with Malcolm Turnbull and be Treasurer with the Turnbull government. You are pivotal to all of this. Do you accept that?
Well, I support the Prime Minister. That's what I accept, and the Prime Minister knows that. And I'm sure the Prime Minister has plenty of advice on those sorts of issues, and I support the Prime Minister.
Yeah, well, that doesn't really answer my question. I mean, you accept that you're pivotal. So you're acceptable.
The essential question is, do I support the Prime Minister? And I do, of course I do, and have. And
you'll be Prime Minister till the election?
We've worked closely. I certainly support him to do that. And we've worked closely on so many issues, whether it's on border protection or in my current portfolio. But ultimately, those aren't matters decided by me. They're matters decided by others. Okay. And I support him.
Well, he's had a good week, and then this emerges. Can't be a great look. He wants to focus on what he's done this week. It's been a good week, and then this erupts in the telly.
Well, Kieran, I don't write the stories, and usually I don't read them either.
Okay, well, I don't believe that last sentence. I'm sorry, but I think you do read them. But anyway, let's move on.
I didn't say I didn't read them. I said I often don't read them.
You often don't read them. Okay, let's look at the other issue today, and the serious matter of the resettlement of 12,000 refugees. Now, you look at what the US has done overnight, 10,000. This is a big number from Australia. Can we do it in terms of the time frame the government hopes to, in terms of resettling these people?
Well, it'll take as long as it takes, but let me put it into context. Over the last 2 years alone, we've settled almost 8,000 Syrian and Iraqi refugee and humanitarian entrants to Australia. Almost 8,000. Now, the reason we could do that is we freed up over 4,000 places per year because we stopped the boats. We did that within the existing intake. Now, more than 70% of that almost 8,000 intake we've had over just the last 2 years were focused on persecuted minorities. Now, a quarter or thereabouts came from those of a Muslim faith, but this isn't about faith. It isn't about religion. It's about who can we best help and who needs our help most. And the evidence is that persecuted minorities, and that doesn't exclusively relate to Christians, but it is predominantly Christians. We should be honest about that. They are the groups that have dominated our intake over the first 2 years of our government.
What do you make of the reaction from the Grand Mufti and others who have been critical of the government's language here? And I guess the question, for clarification on this when it comes to minorities, what about the persecuted majorities, like in Syria, for example, where the Sunni population is a majority, but they've been smashed by the Assad regime?
Well, that is where the intake of around about the 25-27% has come from both, particularly the Syrian community. It's around about 40 95% out of the Syrian intake in particular, and that is overwhelmingly from the Sunni population, and as you'd expect it to be. So it is not exclusively on persecuted minorities, but when you're taking 12,000, that is a very large number. But in the context of hundreds of thousands, you have to set priorities, and you have to look at your settlement program and go, who can we best settle? Who can we best take into the country and support? There will be a cohort, obviously, which comes from the other persecuted cohorts and communities in Iraq and Syria, as there has been to date. So, judge us on our record. Our record is, without even lifting the intake, stopping the boats, freeing up the spaces, we've already taken almost 8,000. More than 70% have been in persecuted minorities, particularly Christians, and the balance has come particularly from those Sunni populations. Now,
that's a policy win, no doubt, because of the lack of arrivals by boat. You've been able to do that more than what was the specific figure again? 8,000.
Yeah, just under 8,000.
Just under 8,000 from Syria.
Just over 7,900 is the figure, and over 70% of those from those persecuted minorities. And the way you settle them, Kieran, is you will work with family and community groups. That's why today's meeting is so important. We've had an outpouring of community support, church communities, others, from the Muslim communities and others. We want to help, and Australians want to help too. And as we know, this often happens in these situations, an outpouring of assistance from the good-hearted nature of Australians. What we have to do today is focus on how best we can corral and organise that support. You don't want that support to overwhelm you and crash your normal programs to support people. And today we're going to be looking at practical ways that we can harness that goodwill and that good support so it really helps us implement the program we have.
And just on the criticism from the Grand Mufti and others who have been, and not just him, but several within the Australian community, both in the Islamic community and generally, about the suggestion that the government might not give as much focus as it should to persecuted Muslims from the same region. What do you say to that assertion?
Well, I think some of the things I've said today better inform the debate about this, and I was making those same points yesterday, though, to be fair. We will continue the sort of focus and priorities that we've already had over the last 2 years, and during that time we have continued to resettle those, particularly from the Sunni population, but we've also resettled Shia as well, and I think that should give people some comfort. We're dealing honestly and in good faith, but I think we should be very transparent also about this process. And of course we're going to support as many people we can, but we're going to support those as best we're able to with the systems we have.
And finally, on the issue of domestic violence, it has been horrific. We've seen the Courier Mail today with a front page of well-known Queenslanders standing up against this scourge. When you look at how much money, and I know this comparison is made, and it's not easy to make the comparisons in terms of the dollars spent, but the dollars spent on counter-terrorism, security and so on, to this, where 2 women are being killed a week. It's unbelievably horrific.
Well, of course it is, and that's why I think there's no corner of the country, no part of government, local, state, federal, wherever, which is not unified on the need to address this. And you've got to address it at every point. And I think the funding comparisons can get out of whack. I mean, what do we think our police forces do every single day? This is one of their primary activities in the community, and the support that is behind that is warranted there. But I mean, just this week, Kieran, I announced the review into online gambling. Now, one of the reasons I'm so focused and concerned about that issue is we know that when people get into problem gambling, and there's a greater risk of that on the online space, that domestic violence can be one of the things that result from that. You've got to attack this problem at every single point: social, economic, law enforcement, community, all of this. Now, we're doing that. I think there's genuine bipartisanship and at every level of government. And Tara's sorry and terrible case will just redouble our efforts. And, Ken Lay and Rosie Batty are still coming back with their report. We're looking forward to getting on with that, and we've certainly made provisions to be able to move on that very quickly.
Yeah, let's hope we can make some progress and improve the situation in this country. It should be a lot better. I appreciate your time, Minister. Thanks.
Thanks, Kieran. Good to be with you.